perception, the false idea that we actually know what we're doing.
I like to think all the gear, no idea. I imagine if things look pretty, it's almost believable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why people believe me, is because I look so pretty. Isn't that right, Carly? Isn't that right, Carly?
Yes, what you said, Master. Sorry, but yeah, no.
Why is my voice coming back to me? Okay. Are you hearing that?
Nope. You sound great. You sound like you're sick.
So you're not hearing a massive echo of our voices coming back through a few seconds later?
No, sir.
Found it. I had a tab open. maybe a tech fail. I might have been watching my own live stream in a YouTube tab and forgotten that it was there. Maybe. I can neither confirm nor deny.
Right. Well, now that we've finally, I love how we start every podcast with a tech issue.
Like, and it's always me. I'm the one humiliating myself with some goofy tech issue. I'm meant to be I've been doing this 16 years, I'll have you know. I'm meant to be the old hand.
And then the young one just swoops in and just kicks your ass. Speaking of which, I have a bit of a bone to pick.
There's no replacement for experience. Hey,
you've
got a bone to pick.
Oh, I have a bone to pick.
Hang on, are we just going, hang on, whoa, I just need to psychologically prepare myself. Are we like diving straight into spicy Carls, like right off the bat?
Probably a Scoville, maybe like 100,000 at this point. Okay. You know, we're gonna measure it that way.
Can I just say hello to a few people first? Hello, Shady Rope. Hello, Tim Boldsworth. Hello, my fam. Hello, Cancel It One. And hello, Jack. Thanks for calling us cookers and losers. We appreciate you making the comment. All right, Carly, let's go. 100,000 on the Scoville scale. Let's go.
Poor Topher.
I need a mug that says I'm already imagining the zip on your mouth or something like that. Like I just need, you know.
I need to get like a screen graphic that just you watch the steam start to just like come off my head. All right. So I'm going to share the screen and we need to have a look at this. So I'm going to add this guy in. So this was a beautiful comment that was left on one of the segments you posted on your YouTube channel.
Right. So this is user that top note. I mean, I like him already. Love what you create, Topher. Happy to buy you several coffees. I like this guy. Whatever this guy has to say is obviously spot on. What did they have to say, Carly?
However, you should consider a pod with someone who can volley with you intellectually. Will be better for your brand. I'm too dumb to be able to read the rest of the sentence, so forgive me, guys. Sorry, I had to tap out.
The sagacious chasm here between you and Carly is vast and evident. Like I said, I mean, the guy's pretty clued in. I think he's pretty on it, Carly. I don't see the problem here.
Well, look, as much as I do really appreciate being told how much of a dumbass I am every episode by your audience, I have a real bone to pick with this person.
Okay, fine.
All right. So it is like clearly evident that there is 16 years of experience that I am missing when I compare myself to you, correct? I think that's fair to say.
I think that's pretty fair, yeah.
And the interesting thing about this is for years, it feels like now, a lot of people in the libertarian, conservative-leaning, moderate sphere have been asking for some kind of podcast where people are openly discussing Aussie issues. And you and I were like, we should do that. We can do that. Because these are conversations you and I have all the time together.
Yep.
And that was kind of the whole point of the podcast. If we wanted to wax lyrically, academically about, you know, the minutiae of politics, we'd probably get 4 people join us for that podcast. And
those podcasts already exist. It's just that no one knows they exist because no one cares.
Well, and this is the thing, right? So, why is it just me? What did I do? So, I've taken over. It's all about me now.
Like,
thank you,
rip me off the screen. Like, I mean, come on, Carls. Come on. I thought we were a team here, Carls.
So I wanted to bring this comment up for a couple of reasons. I mean, yeah, look, for 5 minutes there, I was pretty pissed off because it's kind of nasty. But what I will say about this is a big problem with the moderate conservative side of politics, is that a lot of these discussions are gatekept by people who consider themselves intellectuals or academics, and you know, they're journalists, or they're political commentators, and they feel that to be able to enter into those discussions or to have a seat at that table, you have to qualify. And you need to be able to speak like a thesaurus to engage in the conversations.
You have to have read all the right books and be able to use all the right lingo.
Correct. And look, up until 2020, I didn't care about politics at all. I probably started becoming a bit more interested around the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump election. But to be honest, it was COVID that kicked me off.
Look, Carls, I got to be honest, as rants go, this is a 2 out of 5. Like, this is, there is nowhere near enough spice.
I've watered myself down.
Conviction.
I'm conscious that these people pay your wage, so I don't want to piss off your butt.
Well, it's not much of a wage. I mean, you can't really, like, there isn't much further down to go from where I am. But you're right. More importantly, these people are actually my friends. They've supported me through thick and through thin, and God knows there's been a lot of thick along the way.
And then I come on and just rip shreds off them.
No, I think Tim's got the right idea here. Carly, you do a great job. Just need to replace Tofu with someone better, and by someone better, he means himself.
You're going to cark out on me in a minute, so I might have to.
Yeah, I'm just about to. I'm quite unwell. I battled through one video today, quite sick, and I couldn't bring myself to do a second one. But I want to respond a little bit to that. Have you ever met that person? We've all got that one friend who's still single, and they're like, I can't understand why I'm single. And then they meet a prospective person, and they're just horrible to them. And it's like aggressively pushing them away and barring them from their life. And you're like, well, that's why you're single, right? And libertarians especially go, why does no one take us seriously? Well, because anytime someone comes along that can actually package libertarian ideas in a way that is consumable, you condemn them because that packaging doesn't look right to you. But guess what? The packaging of a typical libertarian is the reason why libertarianism is not acceptable. You and I have reflected before on, you show up to libertarian events, and I'm mindful that there's some watching right now, but I'm going to say it anyway. I believe the word shabby was our preferred description in the end, Carly.
I think I was a little bit more colorful with my adjectives, but sure.
When I dragged my wife kicking and screaming to her very first libertarian conference in Sydney, this is the big one, the big libertarian conference every year. We went our separate ways. I had some work stuff to do, and she came and found me after about 15 minutes, and she came and cornered me, and she said very earnestly into my face, she said, "These people have a serious branding problem." And my reply was, these people have so many more problems than just that. I mean, there are a lot of problems in this room. But this is the reality. I have 16 years of experience, 16 years of experience communicating, and that is a blessing, but it's also a curse. And what you do is you make my conversations enjoyable. Let's not forget why we started the OddCast, because you and I love talking to each other. We have a lot of fun. And we went, you know what, we're just going to point a camera at our conversations, and that's how this whole thing was born. And I think if we have fun doing it, then others will have fun doing it too.
The thing I wanted to point out though here, like, we've discussed that theory before about people being in buckets or, echo chambers, for example. And the issue is, we in Australia, we've just saw this with the federal election. So many younger people are leaning left. And I can tell you exactly why. It's comments like that, basically chastising anyone for just having a crack or trying to participate in the conversation. And when you've got people like that who are discouraging you and basically saying you're too dumb to be here, you don't get to speak, you don't get a platform, you don't have a right, well, then is it any wonder why Australia is going down the toilet? And like, the thing that really frustrates me, and here I am, I'm gearing up to my rant.
Here we go.
When you have people like this who think that they're far more intellectually superior, what they end up doing is alienating themselves from the very people they're trying to romanticize over to their side. The reason why so many young people are completely enamored with socialism is because they accept anyone and everyone. I mean, go and look at these protests. Look at the presentation of a lot of these leftists. They'll take anyone. Their whole thing is inclusivity. I mean, sure, we can sit here and argue about the semantics and that and the ideologies behind that. But there is a reason why Labor has grown a really strong younger voter base. And the thing that most Australians seem to forget is that now the most significant voter demographic is the Gen Zs and the millennials. They've taken over the boomers and the Gen X that no one remembers. So my frustration with that, and this goes to every single one of you watching, is don't discount the people who can't necessarily engage on that level of intellectualism. It doesn't make them dumb. It makes you a moron and ignorant, because you don't realize how many people are out there that do have these conversations, whether it's at their dinner table, at work, with their colleagues or their mates. And sure, they haven't read the books that you've read, but they live in the real world. They're middle-class Australians. They're trying to get past here, and they feel disenfranchised by the political elite.
And they vote. They're the people we ought to be
Correct.
trying to reach. Excuse me.
Robert, you must be new here.
I've just brought this back up. What I also find really interesting is when people that haven't built a brand of their own believe that they know what I ought to do for my brand. Right? I find that really interesting. You should consider a pod with someone who can volley with you intellectually. Well, I love doing those sorts of podcasts, and I would love to guest on other people's shows where I feel free to do that. I was able to do that to a certain degree with the Unemployables podcast, but they're kind of focused more on business, so it wasn't really a sparring. It wasn't an iron sharpens iron. It was more of a they informed me about things and I informed them about things. But this idea that, this will be better for my brand, that this person, that's top note, no disrespect, mate, but I am where I am because I don't listen to comments on the internet. I kind of love this. It's like, if I was the kind of person that cared about the opinions of random people on the internet, I would be the kind of person whose name you've never heard of. Literally, the reason you know my name is because I was willing to stand in front of police horses and go, I don't give a fuck. You're wrong. And if I wasn't that kind of person, you would have never heard my name. So please don't imagine that I'm going to change what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, that I haven't already put way more thought into what I'm doing than you random internet commenter ever will. All right.
Well, the reason I thought I'd bring this up is not just because I wanted to chastise your audience, but more so to point to the fact that, we do have a really strong young audience that is leaning left, and we need to be able to invite them to the table. And I want to contrast this to what's happening in New York right now. So we're going to talk about Zohan Mamdani. Did I say it correctly?
Oh, yes. The future governor of New York.
Mayor.
Excuse me.
And
future
he just won the Democrat primary. He beat out old mate Cuomo, and Cuomo's completely unlikable. But a couple of interesting things that I thought were first important to bring up. Only 900,000 people voted in a city the size of New York. So it's not like he won in a landslide. Mostly people just didn't want to vote for Cuomo. So I wouldn't take this as like a massive indication that the whole of New York wants to become socialist. But I do want to contrast the way that he campaigned. His grassroots campaign was incredibly strong, and he did it in a way that spoke to the youth. And I'm going to swap over to this TikTok. Now, can you believe it? I have been on bloody TikTok, and I found this for you guys. So I just want you to appreciate the things I have to do for this bloody show. So let me bring this up for you guys.
We need you to super chat so that Carly can afford the counseling that she is obviously going to need now that she's gone to TikTok.
Yeah, please, guys, help me. So hang on a second. I'm going to. All right.
I'm going to keep my hands right off. Whatever you're doing, I'm just staying away from it.
Some stores are even using dynamic pricing, jacking up the cost over the course of a day, depending on what they can get away with. It doesn't need to be this way. I'm Zohan Mamdani, and as mayor, I will create a network of city-owned grocery stores. It's like a public option for produce. We will redirect city funds from corporate supermarkets to city-owned grocery stores, whose mission is lower prices, not price gouging. These stores will operate without a profit motive or having to pay property taxes or rent, and will pass on those savings to you. They'll partner with small businesses and nearby farms and sell at wholesale prices. The job of city government isn't to tinker around the edges while 1 in 4 children across our city go hungry. Our campaign is surging, and you want to know why?
So that is what I thought we should look at. Couple of things.
That's proper road to hell is paved with good intentions stuff right there.
Oh, that's communism, 100%. First thing, before we get into what he said, I want you to look at the way that was presented. That was Gen Z specific. He's walking around with a little microphone, which is what all the influencers do. He's walking around doing all these cut shots, doing all these cute graphics, all these cute little TikTok things. That speaks to the people he is trying to incentivize to vote for him. And guess what? Gen Z turned out for this guy. And that's why I brought up the comment from Old Mate, is because these people, these socialists, these commies, these people who want to skew people more towards the greens or the teals, they are smart. They know where their voter base is, and they are creating content that speaks to them, which is why we need to encourage people like Old Mate to not be elitist, right? We need to open the conversation up to people.
Yes. And so putting aside the form, let's talk about the substance a little bit.
Straight to the breadlines, I believe New York City's going.
Well, I love this from Tim because he's spot on. And we're seeing this in Australia. They're saying, oh, we're going to solve the housing crisis. The government's going to step in and we're going to build affordable housing. And the reason it's going to be affordable is because we're going to give ourselves permission to build something smaller. And we're going to ram through the approvals process so it doesn't take as long. And we're not going to build it to the same construction standards. It's like, well, hang on. If that's the reason why you can build it so cheap, why don't you just change the rules so that everyone can build it so cheap? Like, wouldn't that have the same result here? And if this mayoral candidate is acknowledging that things like city taxes and so forth are a core part of the reason why, businesses find it very difficult to run in New York City and therefore everything gets very expensive, well, to Tim's question, why not just let regular supermarkets not have to pay the property taxes? And in fact, why not have nobody pay the property taxes? New York is a really, really broken city, though, in lots of ways. I remember seeing a documentary a little while ago about how in order to, there's no parking anywhere in New York City. And yeah, okay, lots of people can take taxis, but if you're running a restaurant or any kind of a business that trades in physical goods, you have to get those goods delivered. And those delivery trucks, they have a certain number of deliveries they've got to do in order for their business to make any money. So it's become normal for these trucks to just pull up and park and double park anywhere in New York and just cop the fine. And so they'll get a fine. And these businesses now budget for they have a fines budget, the delivery companies, they have a fines budget within their monthly operating budget just to pay all the parking fines. And New York City itself budgets obviously in their municipal budget for all of that revenue. And so it's essentially indistinguishable now from a kind of low-grade protection racket, a kind of low-grade mafioso kind of a setup. And that's not surprising if you know the history of the city. It is a mafia city. But I kind of look at things like this and I go, you know what? Let them have it. Let them have government-run grocery stores. Let them have price controls. Let them have the bread lines. Let them experience that in New York, because the unique thing about America is that their federalist system is upside down from ours. So in our federalist system, if the federal government writes a rule, that trumps all of the states. It doesn't quite work the same way in America. There's a few areas where the feds trump the states, but in most areas, the states can do what they like. And that means that it functions much better in the sense of being able to learn from each other's mistakes. And I would love to watch New York go right ahead and make this mistake and watch the rest of America learn from them.
I mean, New York City has been declining for a long time. I mean, COVID did a lot of damage to it. But then at the same time, you have like the filthy rich. It's some of the most expensive real estate in the world. I think at the moment there's an apartment on Billionaires Row that's selling for $250 million US. And there's only, I think, what did Ryan Sahant say? I think there's like 300 people that would be even eligible to buy it. So you think like New York exemplifies the golden gilded age of America, where capitalism really did raise a lot of people out of poverty. And I understand why there's resentment. And even though this goes against my own ethos and how I personally believe, I do go and engage in these TikToks and watch these people and see what they're saying. And I can sort of sympathize with why they feel disenfranchised. I'm not saying I agree with their solutions. But you've got a lot of people who have been completely priced out of being able to live in New York City. I understand that. It's been a city in decline for a long time. But you've just nailed it, exactly that. They're identifying the fact that it's the government red tape, it's the regulation, it's the taxes that are preventing the small businesses, the bodegas. So anyone that's been to New York, you know that they don't necessarily have big supermarkets. I mean, there's a couple like on Fifth Avenue or whatever. But for the most part, if you live in the boroughs, you go to your local bodega to get your eggs, your milk and things like that. And that's typically run by a small business owner. And as we've talked about before, when it comes to supermarkets, these people are operating on a 2 or 3% margin. There's not a whole margin. They trade on. They're hoping that their neighborhood keeps coming to them for their eggs and their bread and their milk and whatever. And so basically when Zohan Mandani comes out and says, you know what, I'm going to prioritize illegal immigrants. I'm going to prevent with violence, he said, action, ICE agents from coming in and removing illegal immigrants. He himself is an immigrant. He's only been a citizen for 7 years. And he's also basically saying that, hey, to all you small business owners in New York City right now who are already doing it tough, we're actually going to create 50,000 government-run stores that are going to set prices below cost. What's that going to do? I think someone said it's either 15,000 bodegas across New York. That's going to flatten all those. They're done. That's it. And so what happens when all these businesses go out of when they go out of business, sorry, what that means is then you're going to have food deserts. You're going to have places like Greenwich Village, or down in Soho, or up in Kitchen, what's it called, Hell's Kitchen, where there won't be any shops. There's nowhere to get food, so people are going to have to travel further and further away, and that's what they call a food desert. And then what happens, Topher? What happens next? Bread lines. That's what happens.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. And this is, excuse me, I'm going to struggle tonight. I apologize in advance, but I'm going to do my best. As soon as you manipulate prices lower than market, you create shortages. This is inevitable. And that is in the sense that if you force people to sell for lower than a market rate, they will simply stop dealing in those goods. Now, maybe in the form of going out of business, as these bodegas will, because if you're paying full rent and full taxes and trying to sell the same items as a shop next door to you that's paying no rent and no taxes because it's being let's be honest, they're not getting it for free. It's being the cost is being dumped onto the taxpayer. Then you can't compete. You close. What's going to happen then is you've got all of these, this entire supply chain, the entire food for the city is now dependent on the government. And we all know how well that tends to work out. But what you then get is all of that dysfunction kicks in, because without a profit motive, and he specifically calls out the profit motive. He says, we're not going to, these aren't going to operate on the profit motive. Well, hang on. The profit motive, money is a conversation. It is how we explain to each other what we want, what we value, what is more valuable relative to something else. What we are saying to people with everything that we choose to buy, and with every single time you walk past something on the shelf and you don't pick it up. There is this ongoing conversation that is happening between all of us all of the time. It is the most vast and complex and nuanced conversation on the planet, and it's relentless. And profit motivated operators have to pay a lot of attention to that conversation. And what that means is they're constantly attuning themselves to what do people want? What price point can they afford? What are they willing to pay? What if I swap this brand for that brand? What if I try this new product that I've never had in the store before? Does anyone want this? They're motivated to be looking, always listening. If you take away the profit motive, you end up exactly with what they had under behind the Iron Curtain, where Lada, for example, the car company, they had no motivation to innovate. Why would they innovate? They had that one product or the couple of products that they built, and they churned them out on the production line, very low quality, because there's no incentive to have high quality work. There's no issue. There's no problem if it breaks down or what have you. You don't pay a price for that. There's no penalty. The profit motive is what actually gets people to behave at their best. You remove that, you're going to have a very, very rapid breakdown in the food supply and the food chain into one of the most densely populated cities in New York. I would say that within 3 years of him becoming mayor, we would probably be renaming New York into Gotham City.
Yeah. I mean, New York's gone through many phases. I mean, look what Rudy Giuliani was able to do when the mob and all the gangsters had taken over New York. Like, it's no stranger to controversy. It's no stranger to tough times. Yeah. I'm someone that's been to New York, I think maybe 8 times, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say I love it as a city. It's I couldn't live there, to be fair. I could not live there. I normally go there for a week and I have a great time, and then when I'm out, I'm happy to be out. But it's everything that they say. It's fast paced, it's busy, there's something for everyone. But what I noticed about New York the last time I went, and I think it was 2019, so it was a while ago, I'd already noticed that like there was a lot of rubbish around, and it already started to like sort of descend into this sort of decline. And that's because of the Democrats, basically, that a lot of left policies had come in. And I know now that, there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of people walking around that are junkies, like all these different things. And I think we're seeing this across the whole Western world right now. All of our cities in decline. Yeah. Some quicker than others. I mean, you look at Melbourne. I was in Melbourne just a couple of days ago. And I was walking down Collins Street, and that's meant to be, the Paris end of town. And sure, the big shops were still there, your Louis Vuittons, your Hermes. Yeah. But as you get further down, it's just empty shop, empty shop, empty shop, and homeless list like I've never seen, and graffiti like I've never seen, rubbish everywhere. Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand we've always had some of these issues, but to be honest, as someone who's a born and bred Melburnian, I've never seen it this bad. And, I'm really – sorry, go.
And don't let people gaslight you into thinking, oh, no, it's always been like this. It hasn't. It has most definitely gotten a lot worse. It was never like that when I was a kid. By the time I was a teenager, we began to see homeless people in Melbourne. I was in the CBD every week, at least twice a week because reasons. And I would cover a lot of ground in Melbourne on foot or on my push bike. And I would cover city block after city block, and I might see 3 homeless people in a given day, on a given trip.
Yeah.
Now you'll walk past one for each shop front that you go past. There are areas where there'll be, multiples gathered. And I've got a lot of sympathy, a lot of time for homeless people. We talked about this last week. I had a brief stint of homelessness myself. I understand how quickly you can fall into it. I'm not trying to dehumanize those people, but this is a symptom of something being very, very broken. And what people say is this is proof that capitalism is failing. And anyone that's lived something other than capitalism or that's lived something labeled as socialism understands actually it's way worse there. And in fact, what we have today isn't capitalism. But I want to come to this comment from Tace Gomez. It's very difficult for me to lean left because I'm from Venezuela and I have lived the reality of socialism. It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. I was in Caracas for a week in 2015, Tace. I don't know if you know the story. I won't bore everyone with it, but I saw it with my own eyes. And yeah, once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. So I do get where you're coming from. And Amal asks a really good question. How do you respond to commies saying, my Norway, or more generally, all the Nordic countries? So these are countries that have a lot of social programs, a lot of social spending. And so typically very high tax rates. Norway or Sweden specifically, I think it is, has some of the highest personal income taxes in the world. And they've got generous, universal welfare and universal education and these sorts of things and pretty good safety nets for people that lose their jobs, all the rest of it. And they've had that for a couple of decades now. So people point to that and say, well, that's an example of functioning socialism. This is working really, really well. Two key caveats on that. Number one, Sweden also has one of the most unregulated private sectors in the world. If you have an idea, you can just go and do it. You're not begging the council for planning permission. You're not going through and getting a million different pieces of paper saying that you're certified for this and you're licensed for that. That sort of nonsense doesn't exist, or it's coming in now, but it didn't exist for a very long time. If you are going to kind of milk the cow, you jolly well better feed that cow. And if you're feeding it well, then yeah, you can milk it for a while and you'll get away with it. And that's what they did. But the other thing was they actually were very particular about maintaining sort of cultural hegemony. And so there was a lot of cultural unity. And I'm not an anti-immigration guy. I piss off a lot of my own audience by being actually very pro-immigration. But the reality is what they've done recently in allowing a vast number of people from outside of Sweden to simply arrive there, take over the streets of Stockholm, etc., start to feed off that welfare system, is that now Sweden and Norway and these other countries are going downhill very, very fast because they've allowed freeloaders to come in on that socialist system. So yeah, socialism can work if you have a very free private sector and you're very strict about not allowing additional freeloaders to come in and freeload off that socialism. The minute either of those two conditions is not met, you end up at Venezuela very quickly.
Well, interestingly, I was in Norway in 2023. I went up to Tromsø, which is like, I just pointed out this comment here. It is insanely expensive. I was in Copenhagen for a day. I went up through Oslo and then I went up to the north. And look, I was remote. So of course it's going to be more expensive. But the one thing I will point out when it comes to those places is where I was predominantly white. Yeah. And interestingly, now every second day, Sweden's in the news with a new like violent crime, right? And they're pointing to their immigration policies. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on what's going on in the Scandinavian countries, but I can tell you that, we tend to look at things with a rose-colored glass. It's on the other side of the planet. Very few people in Australia go there. So we look at it and we go, oh, well, it's working, must be amazing. Having boots on the ground is a totally different perspective. I was there for 3 weeks, I think, all up, and I went to Iceland as well. For example, I don't think people know this, but again, I know they're remote and they're very cold climates, but you go to Iceland, it is almost impossible to get a fresh vegetable. And the vegetables that you can buy are moldy inside because they're all imported. So, they have their problems as well. And, you can go, okay, so this is working. But when you look at it, again, from that 30,000 foot view, they're not optimizing it either. I think, across the Western world now, immigration is on everyone's lips. Everyone's pointing to that because it is a strain on our current infrastructure. And that's pointing to a lot of the issues here. When you talk about Melbourne, right? It does. And I'm neither for or against immigration? You know, I'm someone that likes to be able to move around. I'm someone that has extensively traveled. If someone was to turn around to me tomorrow and say, we're going to change the rules so that Australians have to stay in Australia and Japanese have to stay in Japan, I'd be like I'd be jumping out of my skin. But the issue is we have so many issues here in our country that we haven't focused on or rectified. And we're allowing 2 million people in the last 2 years alone. And then we talk about the housing crisis. We talk about what's happening in our city. And I think, you know, if you want to have this discussion, you need to be able to talk in a robust way that includes some of those more taboo topics, like looking at what immigration's doing. Who are the people that are coming into the country? Are they assimilating? Yeah. Are they bringing their culture here? And what does that look like in regards to contemporary Australian living? And, you know, all of a sudden the conversation starts to sway into that, oh, you can't say that territory, that's politically incorrect, or that's racist. And I think that's a big frustration here. And that's why it's important to have these conversations. You know, on the left side of the fence, they say more people the merrier. You know, we're bringing in 3,000 people from Gaza. You don't think that's going to cause trouble?
So I'm on the immigration stuff. I'm very much in favor of allowing people to move freely, but you must first remove the artificial incentives. So for me, a social welfare system and open immigration are completely incompatible. You've got to pick one. And I would suggest that the one that is more consistent with human rights is to get rid of the socialist welfare system and allow people to move freely. That is the one that's actually more compatible with human rights in my view, but that makes me the bad guy in a lot of other people's view. But Amal's got a good sort of comment question here. This is kind of unrelated, but in relation to housing, how do you address comments blaming the right to property or blaming, I guess, private property ownership for our housing crisis is how I'm going to interpret that question, Amal. It's not entirely clear. This is so funny to me because the government blames private property owners for the problem that the government created. The government, notice this trick. This is kind of that 3-cup trick, where they put a ball under a cup and they say, this is the free market, all right? And they move them all around. And of course, the free market's gone. You don't know where it is anymore, but you're convinced it's in there somewhere. But the truth is it's nowhere. The free market doesn't exist in housing anymore. They say that it's a failure of the free market. This is a failure of the private ownership of property, etc. No, this is a failure of the government micromanaging and dictating what everyone can do with their supposedly privately owned property. If I actually owned a piece of property, I would decide how it was going to get used. I could decide, you know what? I'm going to build high density, small sized housing, ideal for first home buyers, elderly people, and people who are down in their luck. And the council wouldn't be able to sit there and go, oh no, we have a minimum block size. Oh no, you have to have, each bedroom has to be at least this big. No, I can build it. And if I screw it up and I don't build something that people actually want to live in, I suffer the consequences of that. But what happens at the moment is you're not allowed to do anything until the government says, okay, we'll allow this piece of land to have something done to it. And then they decide all of the rules, all of the terms, all of how and what and when. And then they have the hide to turn around and say, this is a market failure because we don't have enough houses. So this is a trick to watch out for all the time. They destroy things through regulation. And then when everyone goes, hey, that's been destroyed, they go, why would the free market do this?
Yeah. Interestingly, I've been watching again a lot of, say Punters Politics and a couple other things. And G and I watched this interesting video the other day, and I hadn't thought about this before, but I've seen this concept play out in America and I hadn't really thought about it here in Australia. Are you familiar with the NIMBY concept?
Not in my backyard. Yeah.
Not in my backyard. So they talk about that a lot in California. California has the state taxes to be able to solve the homelessness crisis, and yet they don't. And that just for those of you listening, the reason is because a lot of the people who own the wealthy suburbs or own property in the wealthy suburbs don't want those low income houses or that high density housing to build in their area and bring their property values down. And we're watching a tour of Turak, and this guy was walking around and showing a whole bunch of land that has no housing on it that has obviously come up for sale. Someone's knocked it down, and then the person who has the house next door buys it and then won't build on it. So they don't want a neighbor. So they keep that property empty. And so he went around St. George's Road and a couple of other of the, the really leafy areas of Turak and was pointing out, like, this is abandoned, this is empty. This is the most exclusive suburb in, one of the most exclusive suburbs in the country. And you've got vacant land just sitting there. And so there's a couple of things that are at play here. So when we talk about housing and people having access to that, you often hear the boomers say, oh, it's because you refuse to live out, you want to live somewhere that's cool. You're not willing to go sacrifice this for later. It's like, okay, cool. So what you're telling me is to be able to afford a house, I need to go live in a suburb that I can afford. Okay, cool. So I'm going to live 90 minutes away. I'm going to live out Whittlesea. I'm going to live down in like Lara. Okay, cool. So you've just added 90 to 2-hour commute. And then I love this because this person was going around and interviewing different people in Toorak. And, unfortunately, most of them were middle-aged or, older boomers, right? So I'm not just discriminating. That's who they were.
Sure.
And there was a couple of things that were suggested. So when you think about Toorak, you're talking about blue chip liberal seat, right? Maybe not so much more, but I'll give you a couple of their solutions to the housing crisis. One, I kid you not, this is verbatim. This guy was like, if you go drive down Frankston area, you see all these caravans for sale. The government should buy all the caravans and put all the homeless people in those.
Yeah, that'll work.
That'll work. Trailer parks everywhere. What could go wrong? So that was the first solution. And I was like, so who's paying for the caravans? They're worth like $250,000.
Yeah. And also, can we put all the caravans in one place? We'll create a big doorway to drive through to get to this beautiful caravan park, and we'll call it the ghetto.
No, we'll call it District 9. What was that movie where they put all the aliens? Yeah, District 9.
Yeah, that was a Blomkamp, Neil Blomkamp, was it? Yeah, it was a good movie.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
So that was one solution. The next solution was, again, that whole, young people aren't willing to sacrifice where they live to be able to enter the property market. And then it was so cute. Like this old dude was like, oh, that's only half an hour by train. And then the guy goes and Googles how long it is. And it's like a train from Lara to the city. And on a good day, I used to do that commute for 7 years on V-Line. Can I tell you, there was rarely a day that thing was on time if it didn't break down. I don't know if it's any better now, but those commutes, I don't know if Geelong's still like this, so feel free to correct me in the comments, but it used to be that V-Line shared the track with Metro, and as soon as you get closer to the outer suburbs, whether it was like Footscray, North Melbourne, you get all that backlog of all the Metro trains that were also running late, and they're all trying to enter the city loop at the same time, so the V-Line was always the one that was least prioritised. And so it's like, okay, so, and again, I keep coming back to your old mate that left that comment. There's a huge section of the market, the boomers, who are aging out, and they still think that life is the way it was when they grew up. And then you got the Gen X, which is you, and you guys are, pretty cynical. And then you have the millennials who, to be honest, we had it pretty good, but we're also quite jaded from our upbringing. But then you got Gen Z, and Gen Z who want everything and don't understand how things work. And so what you've got is this massive divide between the generations, and everyone is arguing and saying they have the solution, yet at the same time, no one's willing to sit down and have this discussion and understand why the other one feels the way. And I just thought that YouTube video, if I can find it, I'll share it on Wednesday. It was just amazing because he was walking around Toorak asking these people.
So let me piss you off.
Please do.
Because the boomers are half right, but the thing that they're missing is not actually that they had to start at the bottom. They did. What they're missing is that the bottom rungs on the ladder have now been removed. And this comment from Sim really, really makes this point. If I buy land, I can't live in a tent, caravan, shack, not allowed to build a cheap dwelling without risk of the government demolishing it. We're not free. Now, Sim's point is to do with freedom, but actually what Sim is talking about are the bottom rungs of the ladder. What's happened is the property ladder is no longer a ladder that goes all the way down to the ground floor. It used to be in their generation that, you could get a cheap small block of land, build a 2-bedroom shack with a bathroom off the porch out the back, and live in that. And it was affordable to do that. Now, our money's been debased. That's a whole other issue again, but that is definitely a part of the issue. But also, where are you allowed to buy that cheap thing anymore? You can't. Apartment buildings, well, apartments can be small, but they're hideously expensive to build high rise. And so they end up being very, very expensive, even though there's only 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, or what have you. You want to buy a house, go out to any of the suburbs. They're all 4-bedroom, 2 or 3 bathroom on 400 square meters of land. Now, 400 square meters is not a lot of land. I know that. I've lived I lived in out in the southeast in the newer developments out there. I know what I'm talking about here. You walk into one of these base entry level homes and you've got a beautiful modern kitchen, 3 bathrooms, air conditioning, all built to the energy efficiency standards, all built to the various building codes, many of which are completely unnecessary. What that means is that the bottom 4 or 5 rungs on the ladder are missing. They've been removed. They've been removed by governments doing things like what Sim is talking about here. I remember when the bushfires went through up around King Lake, and I was going to do a documentary on it, and I ended up not, because it was really actually hurting my mental health, and I wasn't sure that it was actually going to be helpful to the people that I wanted to help. So I bailed out of the project. But these were people who'd lost their homes in the bushfires, and then the government came in and helped, because of course they did. And they brought in a bunch of new building standards and said, if you want to build a home inside a bushfire zone, you have to use this grade of window and that grade of material and blah, blah, blah. Added a whole bunch of fire safety stuff. Instantly, the cost of building went up by 50% or more. So even the homeowners that had insurance could no longer afford to build on their own property, because the insurance payout from the house that burnt down would no longer cover the cost of building a new house. So a lot of them ended up living on their own land in caravans, and they had no choice.
You're seeing that with the Pacific Palisades right now after the bushfires in California.
Correct.
Same thing.
Correct. Same thing's going on. And people had to live on that block. They couldn't sell the block because with the building codes applied, the block was worthless. So these people they'd just survived a bushfire. That neighbors had died, friends had died. They were living with all the trauma of that, and now they were bankrupt and couldn't get out of the block if they wanted to, and couldn't afford to build on it. They were living on it in caravans, and then the council started to move in. It took about 10 years, but the council started to move in and evict people for living in caravans without permits and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So this incredibly cruel situation where, again, these people, the bottom rungs were removed from they were brought to zero by a horrific natural disaster made worse by human mismanagement, granted, and they needed to rebuild from nothing, but they weren't allowed to, because the bottom rungs on that ladder have been removed, and it's the government that have removed it. That's the thing that's missing in what you're talking about. The boomers are saying, what they're saying is actually true. What they miss is not that it's harder or that it's different now, except the way in which it is different is that bottom rung entry level market doesn't exist, and the government is the reason why it doesn't.
But you've just illustrated my point. I'm a millennial, you're a Gen X. We don't have any don't think we have any Gen Zs here, unless you want to shout yourself out in the comments. But this conversation across the generations is missing. We're always demonizing each other. Millennials and Gen Z are looking up at the boomers saying, you're holding all the wealth. All the landlords are holding onto the property, so we can't enter the market because, you've got 5-6 investment properties. And then the boomers are looking down going, this is our superannuation. This is how we've been able to retire. We sacrificed everything. We didn't go on a holiday till we were 60. So, and this is my point. This conversation's what lacking, which was the whole point of this podcast, by the way.
Sure. It is.
But, I think you and I have talked about this before. When we moved to Australia, my parents bought a block in Sunbury and we started building, and we moved into that house basically when it had a roof on it. It was primitive at best. I've said that we didn't have carpet. We didn't have blinds. We didn't have air conditioning. We were living in basically like a shack. And over time, every time my parents got a little bit of cash injection or got paid, we'd add something to it. And I think it wasn't until maybe 10 years in that property where it was done. And like, we were happy, I didn't realize that carpet was so amazing. And then we got it. I was like, wow, carpet, you can't do that now. There's no way you could do that. But that was a different way of doing things. Now I believe that you can't move into a property until it meets all the standards. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, no, and it's worse than just the standards. There is nothing that you can do. So I talk about the 5 steps to basically to Venezuela. And one of them is nationalization, but there's 2 ways to do nationalization. One is through government ownership, and the other one is simply through government control. And regulation is a form of government control. If the government regulates and dictates what you can do, when you can do it, how you can do it, the standards it has to be done to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what's the difference between that and government ownership? There really isn't one. And so, you cannot provide housing to people without meeting all of the government's requirements. So whether that's inviting people to live with you in your own home, you can get done for overcrowding and various other things like that, or building a property. If I wanted to build a granny flat, well, I got to go begging the government for permission to go and build one. If I want to subdivide, well, you got to meet all the requirements. We are literally not allowed to solve these problems, because the free market has been completely co-opted by the regulatory state. But then the regulators have the hide to say this is a failure of free market capitalism.
Can I just touch on this comment here? Home cooking, saving, getting things slowly. Current generation wants everything now. Can I ask you, Davor, what generation you are? You don't have to tell me your age. Just tell me what generation, because this is exactly what I wanted to highlight. It's really easy to make those blanket statements. Just as boomers are demonized, so is Gen Z and everyone in between. My issue with this sentiment is that you've got to imagine that this Gen Z generation, the TikTok generation, have grown up in a, what did he say? Oh, he hasn't replied. Have grown up in a world where they've only known being chronically online. These kids had an iPad in their hand when they were like 3 years old. Mum and dad gave them the iPad while they went to work. They've been told that the climate is about to collapse at any moment, that there's no hope for them, that everything's, about the capitalism's bad, that, they'll never get ahead because, of the evil landlords. So, yeah, it's easy for you to make those kind of comments. But imagine yourself growing up in a generation where you've been told that the world's stacked against you. Of course they're resentful. And the way Gen Z finds happiness is to live in the moment. That's why they spend what they make, because they don't have a lot. They're not optimistic about their future.
Yeah, and that's a really vicious self-reinforcing cycle. They look at how hard it is, so they go, right, I'm going to find pleasure in the moment. But by finding pleasure in the moment, they reset themselves back to zero because they spend everything they have, and then they make their future even harder. There is a reality here. This comment from Devore, I would also push back, even though I'm happy to push back on Carly on lots of things. I'm going to push back on you, Devore. If you're earning, let's say you're even earning decent money, you're earning 75 grand a year, but you work somewhere that requires you to have a car, let's say. So now you've got the cost of a car, you've got the cost of somewhere to live, and you've got the cost of living generally as it is, power, all the rest of it, and then taxes being what they are. Let's say you're really disciplined and you're able to put aside $10,000 a year. The problem is the house that you want to buy is going up by more than that every single year. In fact, it's probably going up by $70,000, $80,000 a year. So that $10,000 that you saved isn't even really enough to be the 10% deposit of the increase in nominal value on the property that you're trying to save for. And that's why a lot of that generation just cops out, because they look at it and go, well, this is impossible. I can't, this is a moving target, and the target is moving away from me faster than I can chase it. And they're not entirely wrong. Konstantin Kisin at ARC, when you and I were there, Carly, I know you probably didn't hear a lot of the sessions because you were busy photographing and working, and so was I, but I watched Konstantin Kisin's session afterwards.
Oh, his was amazing. He brought the house down.
His was the session of ARC. I highly recommend, look up Konstantin Kisin at ARC, ARC, from whatever year that was, 2023, I think. He made a wonderful point that if young people don't believe that they can start families and own properties and build businesses and build lives, then they they lose their attachment to the culture, the place where they are in. They lose any common interest in its future, in its prosperity, in defending it, in preserving it. It is the ultimate way to demoralize an entire generation, an entire culture, is to price them out of being able to start a life and build a life. And some people say, oh, well, this is proof we need to stop immigration. Some people say this is proof we need government to get involved. I say this is proof that we need to put the bottom rungs back in the ladder and stop the government from telling us that we can't build cheap, affordable housing, small housing. We're not allowed to live in a caravan on a block of land if that's what we choose to do. The government should not be telling us that we can't start on the bottom rung of the ladder.
Can I add a little caveat? This is probably the first tangent of our podcast, but I think it relates into what we're talking about. Young ones have also been indoctrinated basically to look down on traditional jobs. Like, none of them want to be a police officer. None of them want to get trade. They all want to be YouTubers. They want to be famous. They want to, they want to amass wealth now. And I understand that. But I do think that's another generalized statement. It's easy to make that. Not all of them like that. Some of them definitely. Yeah. But the issue is, as a culture across the board, we have really started to embrace mediocrity. And when you look at Australia specifically, our biggest employer is the public sector. So most people are in some cushy middle position in the government somewhere where they're barely working. There's no incentive for them to try. They know they're going to get their paycheck regardless. And you've got people like small business owners who are demonized as the business owners. They're the wealthy ones, tax the rich and all that bullshit. And all of us who are small business owners know that the reality is very much different to that. And what you have now is a generation that resents anyone that's accrued wealth, but also wants that wealth now. And so what I mean by this is, I really do think a big problem that we have, and that would help us with this political divide, is to cultivate self-esteem in the individual again. And what I mean by this is very few people aren't anxious or depressed at any given time in the day. And that could be around, like, ideologically speaking, politically speaking, the world as it exists right now, it's a tough place, whatever. But this is a consistent of human life. Like, we are arguing the best possible time in human history compared to like the 1800s when they didn't even have hot showers, for God's sake.
Sure.
But, it's all comparative. But what I do realize is, like, the people that did one job and did it well for 20, 30 years and became exceptional at it, that we don't have that now. Most Gen Zs swap jobs within 18 months. That's how often they're moving across, right? So, there's a lot of things that play into this. I mean, we can demonize all the regulations and the red tape around industries, but I think actually there's very little incentive for the individual to work hard, to have discipline, and to apply themselves into something. And that's something I think that we should give a little bit more attention to as well. Because if you empower the individual, you empower them to make better choices.
Yeah, incentives matter. And some people try and say, if you lowered income taxes, people wouldn't magically increase their incomes. Well, sorry, incentives matter. If people see that you can do really well by innovating and being creative and working hard and grinding and really pushing, more people will do that. Not everyone will do that, but more people will do that. When you create a culture where the belief is, and in younger generations now, the belief definitely is, there's no point, you can't get ahead anyway. Climate change is going to kill you. Microplastics are going to poison you. The rich and powerful are going to take everything you've got, whatever the particular melee may be. They've been told that there's no point, and they live like there's no point. They live very much in the hedonism of now. Changing the incentives and actually giving people the opportunity to succeed is going to change people's behavior. That's how it works. What's happening right now, and it is already in full swing, is the people that have the drive are leaving Australia. They're leaving the UK. They are leaving the places where there aren't incentives, where it is made difficult to succeed, and they're going to places where there are. The ultimate, so poor people will spend their money and prioritize essentials and the now, the little luxuries that they can have in the now, the consumption. Middle class people will prioritize comfort and just having enough put away they can be comfortable. They don't have to worry, the quieting of the mind and the comfort of the body. Wealth, and I'm not talking rich, I'm talking wealthy. Rich people are consumers. They've got the same actual mindset as poor people, but just more money to do it with. Wealthy people, they spend their money on being free. They spend their money on having choices and living their lives in the way that they actually would like to live them. And so what happens is wealthy people, they have the means to move to wherever in the world is going to best suit them. They can move their businesses. Even if they keep living in Australia, they can move their business into a foundation that's registered in the British Virgin Islands and held in a trust where the trustee is a corporation in Singapore, right? And Australia's lost all tax revenue. Australia's lost all control. We have no jurisdiction over it. And the person could even still be living in Australia, but all of their business activities are now offshore.
That's already happening in London.
Because we created the incentive. Sorry?
There was a statistic that came out last week around London, and I think they're losing, like, on average, 100 or so millionaires a week. That's how many people are leaving London as far as, exactly for that exact reason. Like, say tax the rich, they'll just go elsewhere. Like, and then what happens? What happens if all the wealthy people leave Australia? Who's left? Who's left to tax? I mean, at the moment, the entire Australian country is being upheld by the middle class. What happens when you tax them into poverty and all the wealthy people leave? You end up with Venezuela. I just want to say thank you to all the super chats, by the way. There's been a couple, so I just want to say thank you to everyone that's super chatting. We appreciate them. Thank you. If you can spare us a cup of coffee, we'd be very grateful. But yeah, so there's a lot of people in the comments, Topher, talking about where they want to move to.
Yeah.
I think the fact that you've got middle class people like us all talking about, where we would go, Argentina, El Salvador, the UAE. There's no reason to stay here if it keeps going the way it is. So
yeah. So Tony, I used to see it this way as well. Tony Costanzo said, "Why leave your country? We'll need you. Why leave your country? We'll need you more than ever. Stay and fight." And I'm not going to bore everybody with the story of the old man in the basement, in the jazz basement in Venezuela. But all I will say is, if you're trying to repair the ship and every other one of your crewmates is bashing bigger and bigger holes in the hull, there comes a point where you just go, you know what? My family are on board this ship, and I'm going to head for a life raft with them, because I can't fix stupid. I can't fix the stupid that's around me. Now, for me personally, I don't think we've reached that point yet, but I am working very, very hard to, over the next 2 years, move my financial affairs offshore. I now make, what little I make, I'm working on it. I'm trying to make it bigger, but what little I make mostly from overseas companies, YouTube, Meta, etc. Pay me, for PayPal, through PayPal or through various things like that. So there's no reason I can't actually sell my intellectual property to a foundation registered in, let's say, the British Virgin Islands, do that same trust with a trustee being a corporate trustee, with that corporation being a corporation registered in whatever is the most advantageous tax jurisdiction. And all of a sudden, and it'd all be above board. This is the beautiful thing about it. I can talk about it. I could take all the paperwork down to the ATO and say, this is exactly where what I've done. There's nothing nefarious. I'm not having to hide anything. But get to the point where that's been done. And Andrew Henderson, he calls himself the nomad capitalist. Andrew Henderson, look him up on YouTube. Look up specifically look up his flag theory, 5 flag theory. It's really brilliant, because what he talks about is dividing your life into different jurisdictions. We have this mentality that our entire life is in one country, or if we're moving, our entire life moves with us to another country. The reality is, where you live isn't necessarily the same place as where you might own investments, properties, and what have you, which isn't necessarily the same place as where your bank accounts have to be, which isn't necessarily the same place as where your business has to be registered. And that none of those have to be necessarily the place whose passport you travel with and use primarily. So you've got these 5 different domains, and they can all be different. And the beauty of diversifying those is you can continue to live where you are, but by getting other things out, you reduce the pain, you reduce the downsides of living where you are, which means you can stay longer. And it also means that if the time ever comes that you really do have to get out, getting out is relatively easy. All you're doing is moving house. Nothing else has to move. The people that have their entire lives in a single jurisdiction are the ones that are actually at the greatest risk.
I just want to touch on this comment here. While you all had the opportunity to vote for One Nation, but once again, you voted for Labor and Greens. This brings me back to what we were talking about when we started. Not everyone voted for Labor. I mean, my frustration with this is you're literally making an us versus them. You're posturing yourself as more superior because you voted the way that you did. The whole point of tonight's podcast has been opening up the conversation, realizing that across the different generations, everyone's feeling it in different ways, and no one's willing to listen to each other. Instead, we're all pointing the fingers. It's Boomers' fault, it's Gen X's fault, Gen Z, whatever. And there's a reason why people are starting to vote the way they are. I mean, I just read this. I sent you the article today, Topher. It was basically saying that Gen Z are single issue voters. The only thing Gen Z cares about is whatever issue that they are romanticized by. And at the moment, it's either Palestine or it's LGBT trans rights, right? That's all they care about. So they won't care what every other policy is. They want to vote for the person who is aligned with their way of thinking when it comes to that particular issue. That's Gen Z. They're disloyal. They don't care about the parties. They're more likely to vote independent. They're more likely to support their local candidate that's a woman or that's queer or whatever. Millennials, they're a little bit still stuck in the ways of their parents. They lean more Labor, but they traditionally go with the party as opposed to being willing to try an independent or vote the minor parties. And then, of course, you've got the Gen X and the Boomers. Now, I understand that for most of you guys in this audience, you're either Topher's audience or you're my audience. So you are someone who's probably more libertarian leaning or more conservative. And that's great. We're all in an echo chamber here. There's no one that votes for the Greens in this conversation right now unless they're hating on us. But this is my frustration. You know, you all voted, you could have voted One Nation, but you didn't. So what you're saying is that everyone who didn't agree with you, Larry, is unacceptable by your standards. Well, I just told you that everyone is voting based on the things that they're worried about. They're worried about their kids' future. They're worried about being able to buy a house. They're worried about being able to get a job. Everyone's coming to this discussion with different priorities and different value sets. And what Topher and I are trying to encourage you guys to do is look at the big picture.
Yeah. And can I also make the comment, Larry, maybe I do need to tell the Venezuela story again. This guy that I sat with in this jazz basement underneath this beautiful building in Caracas City, Venezuela, he campaigned against socialism. He campaigned against Chavez getting power. He voted, he agitated, he got other people to vote. He berated those evil people leaving. He was saying the earlier comment about, you got to stay and fight. He was one of those people. And he said to me with great sadness that what he realized too late was that he'd invested everything in trying to save a country that didn't want to be saved and hadn't actually kept anything back in order for him to save his family. So here's the reality, Larry. If 50% plus one people in Australia want to flush us down a socialist toilet, then even if all the elections were fair and everything was above board, we would still get flushed down a socialist toilet. And the 50% minus one of people who fought tooth and nail to stop that from happening will still find themselves stuck in a toilet being flushed down it. And that's what I realized. That was the epiphany of sitting there looking at this old man's face and knowing what it looks like on a man's face when he lives with the knowledge or the belief that he's betrayed his own family, that he failed them and failed to look out for them. And I made the decision there in that basement, I will never be that man. So Larry, I get where you're coming from, but that's just not how the real world works.
And what's the first thing we're all taught when we get on a plane? Put your own oxygen mask on first. It's very hard to fight for a country or to help when you yourself are drowning. And, that's something that I realized during COVID. I went hell for leather trying to advocate for small businesses during COVID, and I paid the ultimate price. It destroyed my career. I'm only just making it back. And, that's the heavy price to wear. Now, if I had my time again, would I do it? I think I would. But I wish I understood what it would cost me on the other side. Like, even though 5 years on, 6 years on, Topher and I have been proven right. The Human Rights Commission of Australia has come out saying that they overstepped the mark. We know the vaccines don't work, all those things. Do Topher and I get any extra credit for it? No. People still call us cookers. People still call us, far right conspiracy theorists. There's a frustration there. And it gets to the point where, Topher and I, at the end of last year, had a conversation like, what can we do? What are we going to try and do? Hence this podcast. And you get to the point where you're like, you know what? I'm going to take care of myself first. I'm still going to keep speaking up, but I've got to make sure I can live and that my partner and I can be happy. And Topher's got 3 kids. So, this is the frustration.
Here's a slightly weird one for you. Simon K with a mismatched image. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you sponsor message? Do you have any idea what's going on there? Because I don't.
I think it's a bot, or if it's a person, they're illiterate.
Or if it's a person, they're hysterically funny. Like this might be just one of the cleverest. I've got no idea what's going on there.
Maybe this is old mate from before, and I'm just so intellectually disabled I can't operate on his level.
Yeah, maybe. And Foxhound, yes, that is something that I talk about. He says, was it you, Topher, who said that most people's thinking is framed 20 years ago? They're not seeing what is really happening around us today. Absolutely. And even fewer people can then project that forward, even 5 years, let alone 10, 20 years. Our beliefs about where we are were formed in our childhood, and they change very slowly, and they lag a long way behind the reality. And they are dominated by a normalcy bias, a belief that anything that seems like it's going too far is going to snap back. It's going to come back to normal at some point in time. And they preyed on that normalcy bias during COVID. And then, of course, it's going to be the new normal, and they're preying upon the normalcy bias. But the reality is the world is not what it was when you were a kid. The ability to actually see the world with clear eyes is a very, very painful one, because it leads you to what I talk about in my book, where, it sucks to be right early, but that's the only time it matters. How do you get to be right early? You just see the world for how it is right now. And then if you want to be seen as a prophet, just think about where you were, take a clear-eyed look at where you are, and then project that forward 10 years, and people are going to think you're Nostradamus.
I just realized that Simon K is quoting Greta from Vintage Greta. Because now we have you have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
All right. Well, I was right. It was an awesome troll. Well done.
Just on that, I mean, today we've seen that, not today, sorry, it was a couple of days ago. We'll probably talk about this on Wednesday. Susan Ley coming out and doing the old acknowledgement of country and saying that it's all about women and women forward. I honestly, if you guys haven't figured it out yet, we need the accelerationist route, because apparently it's just not bad enough yet.
Well, someone asked earlier, what do I think of Brad Batten? They bumped into Brad Batten. They asked, and sorry to that commenter that I didn't pick it up at the time. unfortunately, I can't get excited about any of these people. Brad is probably the best of a bad bunch, but it's a really bad bunch, so it's not saying much to say that he's the best. Susan Ley, she's my local member. I live in her electorate now, and I've had a bit to do with her over the years when she was environment minister and other things, and she's a basket case. She is part of the problem. She's certainly not part of the solution. But what gets me is that you've got this person who wants to have a foot in each camp, and all they do is they piss off both. If you're going to do a welcome to country, commit to it and do the whole thing in a way that's going to keep those people happy.
Well, moderates don't win elections. We know this.
Well, yeah. But if you're not going to do it properly and keep them happy, then don't do it at all, because going halfway in between just pisses off both sides. They can't even get the basics of politics right.
Well, what's interesting is, Jacinda Allen's come out today saying that she's going to establish a treaty or a Victorian voice. And her exact comment was, we're all aligned with this. Well, who, Jacinda? Like, are you putting words in my mouth?
Yeah.
I didn't vote for you, and I certainly am not aligned.
54% of Victorians voted no to the voice, 46% voted yes. So clearly there's not only are we not all aligned, but more than half of Victoria is not aligned. Secondly, I did some looking into this today because I was debating whether I do a video about this or not, and let me know in the comments if you want me to dive deeper. When you actually look at it, so in 2016, there was a sort of an Indigenous treaty organization was formed, and they have formed an oversight committee to have oversight over the treaty process. And this is supposedly an independent oversight body. But if you actually click through and have a look at who the members are, every single one of them is an out and proud Indigenous person. And you go, okay, so we have a body that has been set up that is staffed entirely by Indigenous Australians, government funded with Victorian taxpayer money, that has set up an independent oversight body that is supposedly going to be the arbitrator, the referee, I think was the expression they used. I'm having to think back to earlier today when I was reading, but I think that's the expression. This is going to be the referee to decide what's fair in these treaty negotiations. But every single one of them has been handpicked by the treaty organization, the taxpayer-funded treaty organization, and every single one of them is an out and proud Indigenous Australian that starts off with their bio, their description of, I am a such and such woman, or I am a such and such man. And you go, this is what's being sold by Jacinda Allen as the thing that we all want. This blatant racism, this blatant division along racial lines, this faux independence, this sort of the astroturfing. It has to be this government-funded body where they're bringing in taxpayers' money to astroturf support for something which Victorians have already rejected. The multiple layers and levels of deception that are all now stacking on top of each other. Honestly, if Victorians continue to fall for this stuff and we don't actually start to see some serious pushback, and I mean like now, when? If not now, when? If not on this issue, then on what issue?
I actually, to be honest, and I like to think I'm a fairly optimistic person. I'm going to say this, and I don't want to upset people, but I do think Australia has to get a lot worse. I just don't think there is enough there for the average person to really start to feel it, where they start to take action. I think they're feeling it in small ways. Like the interest rate rises was definitely a pinch to a lot of people. The cost of living. I know this year a lot of people are going to get insanely expensive utility bills, and they might be like, oh my God, this is unfair. But for the most part, I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, who's done quite well for herself, just built a new house. And obviously new houses aren't allowed to have gas. And she was going on and on and on about like, I've got the, I don't know, what do you call it? The stovetop, what do they call it? The induction stovetop, the electric fireplace that looks like fire, but it's not fire. And all I could think about is, you've moved from a beautiful home that had the wood fire, what do you call the things with the door on it? I always forget
the potbelly stoves.
Yeah. And gas cooking. And now you've moved into what I would say is an oppressive, brutalist, Soviet-esque house. Everything's white. Everything is utilitarian. There's no warmth in any capacity. And the thing that like really made me chuckle, I'm like, what are you going to do if there's a power out? Nothing in your house will work. Nothing.
Yep. I lived in a high-rise apartment building for 4 years in Fitzroy, and I loved the lifestyle. The lifestyle that it enabled was fantastic, but you were very vulnerable. And as I spent the years there, I just started to go, wow, I am I mean, it's one thing to enjoy the benefits, and I do enjoy the benefits and the luxuries that come with Western quality of life, but you are, 48 hours without power, and you are now welcome to Lord of the Flies. Like you are right in the thick of hell, and all it takes is for the grid to go down for a couple of days.
I'm so glad you brought up Lord of the Flies. Can I just have a quick show in the comments of who has read that book? Because I make reference to this so frequently. Guys, if you've read it, just write flies as a comment, just so I can see just how many of you guys have read this book. I don't think, when we talk about socialism, and I see a lot of the argument is like, we need to support the people who are doing it the worst, right? We need to help lift those people up. And as we know, the way communism always goes, that we actually all descend down to the level of the lowest.
Yep.
But what I always see is this romantic optimism that should we just do things the socialist way, everyone's just going to get along. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be utopia. And these young ones, the Gen Z, you can tell these books are no longer read in high school, because like Gen Z really does think that if we just had this sort of barter system where, you've got 6 chickens and I've got a cow, I'll swap you some milk for the eggs and everyone will just be happy.
Yeah.
If you've read that book, if you've experienced any moment where there's been a rush, have you ever been in an environment? I'll give you an example. I went to a concert, Big Day Out, years ago, and there was a crowd surge. And what that means is all the people at the back are pushing forward to the people at the front. Yeah. And I was at the front and I was getting suffocated, basically, because I was stuck in a sea of people, to the point where I'm pretty sure people died. And we were just being pushed from the people behind. Now, at the people at the front, we're all saying to the people behind us, stop, there's nowhere to go. We can't breathe. But the people at the back were like, no, I want to get to the front. And so they push. In that environment, when it got to the point where the crowd was starting to freak out, then it was like everyone was for themselves. So all the people at the front couldn't breathe. The security guards were ripping people out. But what happened? The people just charged through other people who also couldn't breathe to save themselves. That's just human psychology. And that's the part that people seem to underestimate. I mean, we saw it in COVID. Look how quickly people just descended into community policing. They didn't give a shit. They'll dob in their neighbor that they were friends with for 20 years.
People fighting over toilet paper, people dobbing each other in, all that sort of stuff. No, civilization is a very, very thin veneer. And one of the things that I'm working towards is giving my family a little bit of resilience. And one of the reasons why I'm wanting to diversify partly offshore is bigger picture resilience, the ability to leave if the situation requires. But a secondary layer to that is the ability to remain in place if, let's say, the grid goes down Spain style. Right now in Spain, they were able to get the grid up in only a matter of a few hours. What if they don't? What if it's more like what happened in Texas, huge winter storm, grid was down for 7 days? What if it's more like what happens in major floods or cyclones or things like that? Grid goes down for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, who knows? Most of us would be in pretty serious trouble if we had to survive something like that off whatever we had in our own house. So that's the next step. If for me is having the passport, having the diversified international stuff, but also having the resilience to survive in place in the event of just a simple grid disruption.
Yeah. I know we're going to wrap up soon. So we've talked about a lot of doomsday stuff. Can I give people some hope?
Nah, I think we should finish on doomsday. Let's just leave it here. Let's just
go drown their sorrows. Everyone crack open a bottle of whiskey. That's the only way to get through it now.
And by the way, before you get to your hope, a huge shout out to our audience. A lot of you have read Lord of the Flies. I was actually quite surprised.
Yeah, it's amazing. And The Giver's a good one, 1984, Animal Farm. These are all quintessential reading. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't read these books anymore, which makes me a bit sad.
Before we get to your hope, found hope, can I just get a bit more information from you? I've been here for 6 years. You mean in Australia? I don't quite understand the question. And I know you're a regular, so maybe this is a conversation we can have over multiple shows, but I'd love for you to just, even if it's after the show's finished, chuck another comment in. It'll pop up and I'll be able to read that. And let's just have a conversation about what it is that you're trying to get to there.
Yeah.
Sorry,
guys, we've got 1,145 people on the stream right now. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're doing these lives every Monday at 7 p.m. And the best thing you guys could do for us is to go and tell other people. We really want to grow this podcast. We've been bootstrapping the last 6 months. We're up to episode 26 this week. And we're really, really grateful for every single one of you that supported us, whether it's a super chat or subscribing. But please, please, please share the show. That's the best thing you can do.
This is only week 2 of the live. To be clear, this is week 2 of the live, but the actual podcast that comes out on Wednesday nights, we've been doing that for 6 months this week. Oh, yeah.
It's been really fun. And it's interesting, now that we're on a live, we get to see what you guys want us to talk about. And it's great to have that conversation. But I wanted to give you some hope. So Topher and I have 2 key words that we focus on with this podcast. Mine is courage and Topher's is hope. So we'd be really amiss if we didn't round out the conversation with something to be optimistic about.
It would be funny, though.
It would be funny, but then I don't think people will come back next week.
I don't know. A bit of fear porn sells.
Amanda's written podcast. Yes, Amanda, you're watching it. This is it. This is the OddCast.
Well, no. This is the live. The podcast comes out on Wednesday nights. It is on. We haven't mentioned. Carly, how can we get this far through a live? At the OddCast HQ on YouTube. That's where you need to go, and you need to subscribe. Well, I want to see our subscriber number jump by another 1,158 people, because that's how many people we have online right now. At the OddCast HQ, and you won't miss an episode. And it's also available on all the podcasting platforms.
Yes. And guys, those subscriber I can't even speak. Those subscriber numbers really matter to us. So please, if you're watching this on Topher's channel, jump over there and subscribe to the OddCast HQ, and you'll see a podcast uploaded every Wednesday at 7 p.m. and this live every Monday at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Anyway, may I continue my conversation?
Oh, fine.
What did I just read? Anthony Albanese is a weak gay feminist man. To be fair, I think that's a fairly accurate assessment.
It's reasonably accurate. I was trying to click on the other comment that I brought up, which is you two are crushing it tonight. Great chat. But hey, you can go for the other one if you want.
I appreciate it. When I do get a compliment, I'm like, oh my God, someone likes me. Thank you.
Lots of people like you, Carly. I like you as well.
Oh, stop it. I'll get a really big head. No, but back to my hope sentiment. So I spoke about this just, as we were getting into the depth of it, that I do believe that we need to start cultivating self-esteem, particularly in the younger generation. And I'm aware that we probably have an older audience watching. I think a lot of people are saying they're Gen X. I'm a millennial. I'm 39. I'm 1986 vintage. So I'm right smack bang in the middle of the millennials, I believe. So I have a foot in both camps. But what I will say is there is a skills shortage, and I don't just mean in trades. I mean across the boards. We have a lot of people who are good at not very much, a lot of people that are fairly mediocre and rudimentary with basic skills. And given that we are going into some arguably very difficult times, even if you're someone that's in like a middle position in an office job, and you're frustrated because, maybe you earn a decent enough wage, but you're feeling a little bit lost. You're not feeling optimistic about the future. There has never been a better time right now than to learn a skill, learn it as a hobby, and to really cultivate excellence with that skill. It doesn't have to be bloody woodwork or, leathersmithing or bloody, just pick something. Pick a tangible skill, whether it's growing fruits and vegetables. There's a lot of people who are starting little hobby farms, starting a greenhouse. Maybe it's learning how to pickle things. Like, become exceptional at one thing. And firstly, what that's going to do is cultivate self-esteem in yourself, because you're going to feel amazing that you now have this new skill. But also, you're going to be resilient, because guess what? If you can do that one thing, if the world was to go to shit, you could trade that skill and that will help you. And my issue with a lot of people, I'll give you an example. I have a lot of girlfriends who are single and who have to outsource everything to like a paid tradesperson because they can't do the basics. And, I was at a girlfriend's house the other day and she had an issue with her car. And she's like, oh, I'm going to have to take it in for service and do this, this, and this. And I'm like, mate, do you not know how to change your tire? And she's like, no. I was like, what do you mean? Like, it's not a hard thing to do. And she's like, oh, I've never done it before. And I was like, well, let's do it. I'll teach you. Yeah. She's like, no. I don't want you to muck around with my car. Like, I'm unsure. And, we take those skills for granted. A lot of us learnt those from our parents, but we've got a whole generation under us who don't know the basics anymore. So when I say I'm going to give you hope, there has never been a better time than right now to actually upskill yourself. And there are so many opportunities. And I know a lot of people are just feeling like, oh, I'll just sit here and doom scroll on Instagram all night and watch some Netflix serial killer documentaries. But you have time. And unfortunately, the boomers will jump on this. You've always got time. It comes down to your priorities. And if you really care about your future, now's the time to pick yourself up, put on your big girl or big boy pants, and actually apply yourself.
And Foxhound has a great point here. So, Carly, that's lifted straight out of week 6 of my course, which is all about next steps, or community is week 5, and then next steps is week 6. And you're absolutely spot on. I talk about that extensively in that, and we're going to talk about it again in the course that you and I are working on putting together. But Foxhound is dead right. Build a network of friends. Do not try and do it alone. You end up on the wrong side of all kinds of things. It's bad for you psychologically, but also just at a practical level, you end up on the wrong side of just fundamental economic principles like the division of labor and the economies of scale, etc. When you're trying to do everything all at once and provide for yourself absolutely everything without any trade with anyone, then you've made life incredibly, incredibly difficult for yourself. So cultivating a network is really important. And maybe Carly, how about this? How about we start a cult? Let's just start a cult.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Where everyone can like chip in a few dollars. We'll buy a big block of land and have a commune, and then when it turns toxic, we'll kick everybody out and we'll just keep everything. How does that
Topher
sound?
just wants to have his own harem. That's
a harem. Yeah, no. Listen, I've learned a bit about cults over the years, and I'll tell you what, that seems to be the one thing that they all have. No, but you need a community. You need people that know you, you know them. And also, Carly, back to your skills thing. You need to think about what are the skills that are useful to you, but also what are the skills that would be useful to others. In a more, let's not take a zombie apocalypse, but let's say that the standard of living continues to drop. Let's say that the cost of energy continues to climb. Let's say that the screws just continue to get tightened. What are the things that you could be learning now that are going to be useful to you, but are also going to be useful to others in your community? And then trust that they're going to be teaching themselves a different set of skills that are useful to them and useful to you. And that is one of the ways that we're going to be able to protect ourselves and shelter ourselves going forward, is by being a part of a community where everyone takes this a little bit seriously and goes, okay, I'm going to spend my time, learning a skill instead of doom scrolling on Instagram. Although I will say, if you want to sit there and watch the entire extended edits of Lord of the Rings every day, that is a more valid use of time. So maybe stop doom scrolling and just watch Lord of the Rings every day. That works too.
Do you know what's interesting, right? I tried my hand this year. We've just moved into a house where we actually have a backyard. And I was trying to be a bit of a green thumb. So I tried, tomatoes, pumpkins. I had zucchinis, like just a few different things. And it became very evident to me that there's a lot to learn. Like I just thought, chuck them in, throw some fertilizer in, do all the right things, and like they would grow. And obviously bugs got to them, and then the weather got to them, and all these things. And, it was just a fun little exercise. So this time I'm like, okay, cool. That was round 1. Now we've got to, try a bit harder, do all these things. And then before you know it, I'm going to have a full greenhouse out there. But, whilst learning that skill, one, it's fun. It's cool to do this thing and then get the fruit at the end and like make yourself pumpkin soup. That's a cool thing.
Sure.
But further to that, it gives you a really big appreciation to your farmers who do this for a living and are responsible for feeding the country. If there's anyone doing it really tough right now, it's our farming community.
Heck yeah.
And this is my frustration with a lot of the younger generation, particularly the vegans. They're like, oh, eat plant-based, do all this sort of stuff. I'm like, are you going to go grow the food? Do you know how hard it is to cultivate these crops? Do you know how hard it is when we are in a drought or in the government's regulating everything and you can't get what you need to be able to grow that crop? You say, and this is how you counteract these arguments. When people, like I said, Gen Z particularly, are single issue voters. They care about one thing and one thing only. So how do you invite them to the conversation? How do you bring these people into the fold? Well, you give them an opportunity to learn just how hard it is and to open their horizons a little bit. And I'm telling you now, most of these young kids have never had their first job like we did at Macca's or, at the local CD place or whatever.
Paper out, represent.
What was that?
Paper out, represent.
My first job, my first technical job was Macca's. And can I tell you, I fucking loved that job. Loved it.
Macca's is actually a great, if it's a well-run Macca's, if you do their training towards management, it is genuinely some of the best training that a young person can get their hands on. It beats the crap out of most university degrees, certainly the first couple of years of any uni degree, beats the crap out of a lot of TAFE courses as well.
I don't know if it's still like that. Macca's has
descended. I don't know either. True, I don't know.
It's definitely gone downhill a lot. I used to, for anyone that's from Sunbury, I used to work at the Sunbury Macca's, and it was kind of a rite of passage, and it was like the cool job to get because you got paid the most at Macca's. I think I got like $8.79, so woo.
Rich kid,
and
rich kid.
My parents taught me a pretty valuable lesson about money. You know, they were happy to buy me the basics, right? Like we'd go to Target and you do your seasonal clothing shop. But of course, I was too cool for Target. And they're like, well, if you want Roxy all over your butt, you can go and earn that money yourself and go and buy yourself some surf brand clothes. So I did. But, you know, Macca's were militant with their procedures. Like this is back when everything was
them good. That's what made them a good place to work.
They had a 90-second time frame from the second that someone came to the counter. You had 90 seconds to take their order and give them over their order. And so, I mean, you know, food standards have changed a bit. We don't pre-cook everything, so now it's sort of cooked to order. But you learned how to work firstly in a team, and you really relied on the other people in the kitchen. And what a great opportunity for a 14-year-old to learn how to work as a team, how to problem solve, how to deal with conflict. But, you know, a lot of our young ones don't get that opportunity anymore. Their parents are helicopter parents who are like, no, you need to focus on your studies. Go and get your arts degree. Mummy and daddy will pay for everything, you know.
I want you to have what I never had when I was young. Yep.
Bring back the McFeast. The McFeast was bomb.
Now, I hate to end on a sour note, Carly, but you remember that conversation that we had? We were like, we're going to keep this to 60 minutes only. We're not going to let it go over 60 minutes. Yeah, about that.
I'd like to deduct points for your technical issues, so I think that's worth at least 25 minutes. So really, we're on time. Girl math.
About a 25-second technical issue was
resulted in an extra 25 minutes of talk time. Yeah. Girl math.
Okay. Well, I mean, I didn't know the exchange rate from technical issue to talk time was quite that savage. I'll be more careful in future.
Yeah, there you go. Can I end on a positive note? We have a new merch idea.
Oh.
I'm gonna bring this up. So given that we are an aging demographic in our podcast, I feel like a lot of the gentlemen in this group are going to enjoy this. So can you believe that at the ripe old age of 39, I have actually never seen Star Wars?
For shame, Carly. For shame.
Yeah,
Not even the originals?
No.
Wow.
I'm so uninterested. but my partner has also not seen Harry Potter, to which I was like, disgusting. Meh. So we had an accord that we would sit through them together and we will watch them. So he watched the first episode of Harry Potter and I watched the first, well, it wasn't the first, whatever the original first Star Wars is. I watched that.
Yeah. Episode 4. A New Hope, I think it was called.
Anyway, last week, I stuffed up my sentence structure and I said, stay on tangent. And I actually thought that was really funny.
Hilarious.
Yeah, and so now we have.
How does that relate to Star Wars?
Stay on tangent.
Oh, that's cool.
So instead of stay on target, it's stay on tangent.
That's very cool. For those who don't know, that's kind of the graphic that Luke Skywalker sees when he's flying the fighter through the trench to try and find the ventilation shaft to drop the proton bombs down. Not that I am into Star Wars at all.
Geek out, man. Go for it.
That's really cool. Stay on tangent. That's so cool.
There you go, guys. So we've added that into the mix. So,
all right. So we've got to get some samples so that we can wear them on the show so that people can see them, and then we'll put them up for pre-order.
Yes, we will do that.
All right.
Yeah. So that's the good news to end the show.
Excellent.
Unsubbed, never super chatting again. Sorry, I've offended some people. I am so sorry. I didn't realize how many dorks were in this conversation.
Dear.
Well, I'm a Harry Potter nerd, so you know, win some, you lose some.
There's some people with good taste, though.
I need that shirt.
Love it. Unsub Carly Shame, never super chatting again. He says as he super chats. Has no one told you how the internet works? Found hope. I think maybe you might need like a beginner's guide or something. Look, tonight's been fun. What?
Here we go. Didn't realize your lives went longer than 5 minutes. Oh, mate, they'd go 5 hours if you'd entertain us.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Oh dear. This sounds dangerous. Carly, have you checked your DMs? I've done a Topher character. I don't think
God.
I'm now officially frightened.
Guys,
Hannah,
if you
have
ever
officially
DM
frightened
me, I wish you luck. My DMs are like a wildfire. But if you want to send it through, send it in like the next 5 minutes and I will check.
All right.
Unfortunately, I get too many.
We've got to wrap this up. This is an hour and a half now. We've got to wrap this up. This has been fun. Follow at Carl J. Soda. Follow at Toverfield. Make sure, most importantly, you follow the OddCast HQ on YouTube. And don't miss every single episode of the OddCast releasing on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. and the OddCast live on Monday nights at 7 p.m.
And everyone, round of applause because Topher made it through tonight. So yay, well done. Well done.
Only just.
You can go and relax that voice because you got a podcast to do on Wednesday. So chop chop.
Yeah. I'm going to go and relax and sleep.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Thank you, everyone, for your super chats. Very appreciated. And we will see you next Monday at 7 p.m.
If you don't see us on Wednesday.
Well, they won't